ছেড়ে দিলে সোনার গৌর আমি আর তো পাবো না ওগো ছেড়ে দিলে সোনার গৌর আর পাবো না 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 ছেড়ে দেব না তোমার হৃদ মাঝারে রাখিব ছেড়ে দেব না তোমার হৃদয়ে রাখিব ছেড়ে দেব না
You never know what your neighbor is going to do on his 100th birthday. Here in Kolkata, I grew up in the shadow of Tata Steel. Just down the road from our home, facing the Victoria Memorial and the Maidan, stands Tata Center. I watched this building being built. A modern high-rise, towering above this ancient, passionate, marvelously chaotic city. Look over there at Howrah Bridge, arching her steely eyebrows over the torpid brown waters of the Hooghly. 23,000 tons of Tata Steel went into building the busiest bridge in the world. When I was younger, much younger, I used to attend parties in this penthouse apartment. Unforgettable in every way and forevermore, that's how you'll stay. Today is something very special, so much to celebrate. Who would have imagined that I'd get to light 100 candles on a birthday cake? Of course, it's not my party. I'm not that old just yet. But for most of my life, I've been hearing about Tata Steel. You know, JRD, Jamshedpur, the usual stories. Recently, I've come to know much more. An astonishing history, the tale of a century. And here's the man who started it all, Jamshedji Nasarwanji Tata, one of India's most eminent Victorians. Always ahead of his time, Jamshedji proposed that India manufacture its own steel and forge an independent industrial future. The sheer audacity of the man. You can almost hear the Barasabs muttering into their chota pigs. Iron from India? High-quality steel? Impossible! Who the hell does he think he is? Of course, the British wanted to ship their own steel here, from Birmingham and Sheffield, and sell it at exorbitant prices. They weren't going to help a presumptuous Indian, refused licenses, discouraged investment. So in the year 1900, Jamshedji went to America. New York, Chicago, Washington, Pittsburgh. In this, the steel capital of the world, furnaces burned all night and workers sweated out 12-hour shifts 7 days a week. The toughest job in the world. Dirty, dangerous, a man-made hell. That was America. But Jamshedji Tata had his own vision. Instead of engaging in ruthless exploitation, Jamshedji believed that he could manufacture iron and steel without desecrating the land or demeaning its people. To begin with, of course, there was the adventure of discovery. The Wild West came east. Remember that film, McKenna's Gold? A bit like that. Prospectors cut through the jungle, guided by tribal blacksmiths, searching for iron ore, coal, limestone and water, their own form of gold. This was where it all came together, at the confluence of the Korkhai and Subarnarekha rivers, under the forested ramparts of the Dalma Hills, where wild elephants still roam. Built on the site of a village called Sakchi, India's first steel plant became a national treasure, even before there was a nation. Nothing quite prepares you for your first visit to a steel mill. Tata Iron and Steel Company, fondly called TISCO, was founded by Jamshedji Tata's son and heir, Dorab Tata. When TISCO was incorporated on the 26th of August 1907, its Bombay headquarters were besieged by Indian investors. The prospectus created so much excitement that everyone from the man on the street to scions of princely states all poured in money. With the fire of the freedom movement burning, Jamshedpur's furnaces became a proud symbol of Indian independence. Workers from all across the country came to build this steel town in the forests of eastern India. Tribals from Jharkhand, Sikhs from the Punjab, Pathans from the northwest frontier, brave sons of Bihar, Orissa and Bengal, laborers from every corner of the subcontinent. While India was fighting for freedom, TISCO was already laying the foundations of a nation. Many foreigners came here too, from the industrial heartlands of the West. Germans, Irishmen, Welshmen, and especially Americans. Here's one of them, John L. Kenan, once known as the American Maharaja of Jamshedpur. He came to India in 1913 and stayed for 25 years. Listen to what he had to say. A man can see a lot in 25 years. What I saw was the transformation of the old cultural India into a new industrial India, with Tatas as the backbone of the country's growing industrialization. The pioneering years were filled with colorful characters like Barjorji Padshah, a brilliant professor of economics and a close confidant of the Tata family. Padshah refused wages, asking only that the company cover his frugal expenses and, of course, pay for his books. Whenever difficult decisions had to be made, Padshah would recite Robert Browning's verses. Ah, but a man's reach should exceed his grasp. Or what's a heaven for? Yet he worked very closely with Charles Page Perrin, an impatient New Yorker who had absolutely no time for poetry. Perrin helped prospect resources and later oversaw the first major expansion of the company. Encouraged by Dorab Tata, he drew up plans to supply all the iron and steel that India required. With the onset of World War I, the demand for steel exploded. Tata's mills in Jamshedpur supplied railway tracks and armaments to the front lines in Egypt, Palestine, and Mesopotamia. During the war years, another eccentric was T.W. Tutwiler, a fiery blast furnace man from Gary, Indiana. As general manager, he was known as King Tut, and much feared for his, and I quote, two-fisted, bull-necked efficiency. Tutwiler's language was as volatile as his temper, and he caused a general strike by yanking a foreman by the tie. During the war with Germany, King Tut posted armed guards and even slept in the works himself to make sure his German engineers didn't sabotage production. After World War I, the bottom fell out of the steel business. Surplus war stocks and steel made from the scrap from battlefields were dumped in the unprotected markets of India, sending prices spiraling downward. Suddenly, in the middle of its great extension program, Tisco faced ruin. To save the company Dorab Tata, now Sir Dorab, was forced to pledge his entire personal fortune, including the famous Jubilee diamond belonging to his wife, Lady Meherbai. Not just Tisco, but much of the world was in turmoil, with the Bolsheviks having ousted the Tsar and communism spreading around the globe. The Russian Revolution was a watershed. It changed the way workers the world over viewed management. In Jamshedpur, labor unrest led to chronic shutdowns. Concerned that India's first experiment with heavy industry might fail, Mahatma Gandhi visited Jamshedpur to meet with the workers. Soon afterwards, a young, dynamic Subhash Chandra Bose became President of the Union. Here in the Tata archives is an original letter written by Bose to the chairman of the board. My dear Mr. Saklatwala, you are aware that one of the important problems before the company is that of Indianization. Tata's made a very good beginning several years back, and this raised great hopes in the minds of the public. I feel very sincerely that the future of this industry, including peace in the labor world, depends largely on Indianization. With best regards, I am yours sincerely, Subhash C. Bose. One of the ironies of history is that a decade later, during the Second World War, Netaji allied his Indian National Army with the Axis powers, and Tisco remained the only allied steel plant this side of Suez. It built the legendary Tata Nagar tank that went on to defeat General Rommel, the Desert Fox in northern Africa. British soldiers praised it for being safer than slit trenches during a bombing raid. It was said that machine guns couldn't scrape the paint off a Tata Nagar tank. Reminds me of some of the Tata vehicles I've known. By this time, J.R.D. Tata was firmly behind the wheel, a captain of industry who took the controls whenever he flew into Jamshedpur. When independence came, Jamshedpur was held up as a shining example of industrialization. At the 50th anniversary, when this Jubilee Park was inaugurated, Jawaharlal Nehru said, "India needs 500 Jamshedpurs." Everyone came to see Tisco, the Shah of Iran, Marshal Tito, world leaders, visitors from every continent. Jamshedpur is the modern equivalent of a Taj Mahal, India's industrial heritage site. But it isn't the place alone that draws visitors. It's the idea of Jamshedpur. For 100 years, something special has been happening here. The realization of an almost intangible dream. People talk about the spirit of Jamshedpur. What is it? Ask anyone who's ever lived in this town, and you will see the answer in their eyes. It all goes back to the founder's vision. Jamshedji Tata wanted to build far more than just a steel mill. He believed in a company that treated its employees as human beings, providing them with a secure, comfortable life in a clean and healthy environment. keeping with Jamshedji's vision, the company and its workers signed a landmark agreement in 1956 that gave them an unprecedented role in the company's management. For labor relations, this laid an unshakable foundation of trust. Tata Steel has enjoyed over 75 years without a strike. Long before corporate social responsibility became a convenient cliché, Tata Steel had reached out to those who needed help, offering healthcare, education, community development, and generous support for tribal culture and art.
तो फिर बोलिए तो एड्स कैसे फैलता है?
J.R.D. Tata led the company forward despite the frustrations of the license Raj. Tisco supplied steel to India's most prestigious projects, even as it faced crippling obstacles imposed by government. But the greatest challenge was still to come. In the early 90s, deregulation and a worldwide drop in steel prices brought the company to the edge of a precipice. But instead of getting out of steel as many experts advised, Tata stood their ground and made some painful choices, reducing their workforce by almost half through a remarkably generous and far-sighted early separation scheme. All this went hand in hand with a quest for excellence, initiating the latest management practices, implementing cutting-edge technology, researching new innovations. By the dawn of a new millennium, Tata Steel could proudly call itself the world's best steel plant. In this 100th year, the company could easily have paused to reflect on the remarkable achievements of a century. Instead, it stepped confidently forward and made a successful bid for Chorus, the second largest steel company in Europe. Together with its earlier acquisition of Nat Steel in Singapore and Millennium Steel in Thailand, what was once dismissed as an upstart company east of Suez had acquired assets in 28 countries across 4 continents. For anyone who knows the history of Tata Steel, the Chorus acquisition was no accident, no gamble. It was all part of a long and determined effort that began under the yoke of the British Empire. And yet it was the vision, the foresight of just one man, Jamshedji Tata, who saw beyond political posturing and economic conquest to the farthest and freest horizons, where his successors, 100 years later, could survey an unfettered world of limitless possibilities.